explaining that there was a war between the United States and Mexico. And then maybe they talked about the educational practices. Anybody who came to the schools was not allowed to speak Spanish. They even had a practice for teachers. If a child was speaking Spanish on campus, they take them to the bathroom and wash their mouth out with soap. They even had Spanish detention as late as 1968 and 69. If you were caught speaking Spanish, you stayed after school. So the walkouts and the demands and goals of the walkout leaders was like, why can't kids speak Spanish and transition over into English? Why can't they continue their mind's expansion, educational, scientific, and mathematical knowledge in the Spanish language and again make the transition? That was the goal. It succeeded. Got a lot of resistance. It took 30, 40, 50 years. Now people understand. That made a major difference. Students were now able to sort of make the transition into the American English speaking norm. One of the sad things, though, that historically we've had another issue and problem that John mentioned, those industrial arts classes, vocational arts. Roosevelt High in the late 40s, early 50s had two male students. One of them became a professor, PhD from Harvard, Julian Nava, okay? Later Board of Education member. The other was Edward Roybal. He became a city councilman and then eventually a congressman from California. Both of them at Roosevelt were counseled into being an auto mechanic and a body and fender worker. But they didn't listen to their counselors. Today, I still get students who were told, my wife back there was told to be a secretary. She went to Garfield. She had other aspirations. Marrying me were, of course, among her highest ones. But she eventually got her college degree, and she didn't become a secretary. She became a professional. One of the things we have to really think about for the next walkout, this is going to be the big one, because we're going to have a lot of Mexican immigrants that are going to be radicalized just by the process of history. Doors opening, doors shutting, gradual consideration, and then eventually, like in 2006, the big immigrant march in LA and throughout the country, almost 1 million Mexican immigrants marching for better conditions, blah, blah, blah. And the historical debt has to be paid. And that debt is education was kept from our people. And let's start with the indigenous population in Mexico and other parts of the United States. Indians were just as intelligent as any Spaniard or any European. So the first years of the Spanish presence, the Indians were educated like anybody else. The clerics, the Dominicans, the Franciscans, Augustinians had schools for them, educated them. They were doing great. The Spanish authorities said, wait a minute, we didn't start a colony in order to educate the indigenous population. So in the 1560s, they stopped educating the indigenous population. And they brought the Jesuits in to focus on the Criollos, the guys who were Spaniards born in the New World. And the Indians were relegated to what you were talking about, still going on 500 years later. Leather work, woodwork, carpentry, adobe making, all the different vocational, industrial, not even industrial, but just working with your hands. So for 300 or 400 years. And then the United States comes into the picture, and then they have segregation, no counseling, no testing that reflects their cultural background. So for 500 years, the educational system has not been geared to help our people. We fought for the walkouts, and we had some inroads, some changes. But there's a hell of a lot more work to be done. And I'm waiting for the new Mexican immigrant population to weigh in, because they will weigh in, I guarantee you. It may not be fast enough for some of the Chicano activists. They want us to sort of do not jump rope, but hopscotch. Hopscotch, leapfrog over each other, then move on to a better life for all of the Mexicans. Anyway, I'll have more to say about that later.
Okay, I just founding of America, thinking that we're going to gain power because we have so many brown people, is not necessarily true. The problem is we do have millions of brown people, millions of Chicano faces and Mexican Americans. The problem is they've taken on the conservative thinking mind. They have taken on the white world view. And as long as they continue to force our students and train our students to take on the white world view, they're no good to us. They don't do any good for us. And so that's why it's very important to begin to implement the brown worldview and to create a better educational system for our people. Not one that assimilates us, but one that understands our cumulative knowledge. We have accumulated a lot of knowledge since the walkouts in 1968. We have accumulated much information just from the walkouts and in our building and development over the last 50 years. We have accumulated knowledge over the last 500 years prior to Columbus. We have accumulated knowledge for thousands of years, and our cumulative knowledge has been lost. It has been destroyed. Our books, our codices from the Aztec era were destroyed. The books from the Mayan era, civilization, were destroyed. And so therefore it's very important that we bring back our culture and our history to make us strong. Now if we can just go, let's do just one more minute and then we'll go open up for questions, okay?
Yeah, I just want to Lincoln High School. At that time, Lincoln High School was from the 7th to the 12th grade. So you were there for about 6 years. I happened to be there a little longer because I didn't have the credits to graduate, which meant that I could run track again for another semester, and also it meant that I could participate in the walkout. So we all know that the students were being tracked into industrial arts, and the girls were being tracked into home economics and business classes. And one of the things that was real noticeable right away at Lincoln was the dress code. I've talked to students that were going to school in '68. Some of the female students, they had a policy at Lincoln: the girls could not wear pants. Try to figure that one out. I still can't figure it out, but the girls could not wear pants. So if the girls started wearing skirts and even mini skirts, and they would, if they thought that the skirt was too short, they would make the girl kneel and see if the skirt touched the floor. The guys, they were always picking on us for our shirt tails, that tuck our shirt tails in. So those were some of the obvious. And then the paddling and the swatting, well, that got out of control. I remember at one time, if you were defiant, or if a teacher, for whatever reason, you broke some type of a rule or whatever, or you were defiant, they would get you right in front of the class, right in front, and they would swat you. And I remember there was an African-American student in my English class, and he acted out or something. The teacher, he got him in the front, and he swatted him 3 or 4 times, broke the paddle. That's how hard. There was a teacher at Lincoln, a female. Her name was Miss Panko. This woman was about 6 feet tall. Man, she could really pack a wallop. I mean, the guys were afraid of her because she would, she would swat hard. The teacher would even drill holes in the paddle so they could get more velocity, so they could hit harder. And then some of the teachers would put on the paddle the Board of Education. The swatting got out of hand. It got out of hand to where administrators were walking around. I've heard stories where they would just tell you, come over here, and swat you, and the student didn't even know why they were being paddled. So they used that paddling a lot. That was very obvious. The dress code, and then came also the tracking, the counselors, even in Sal Castro's book. I encourage all of you to get that book called Blowout by Sal Castro and Mario T. Garcia, because Castro, his last job was as a counselor. And even then, at Lincoln, the counselors, the numbers were, the ratio to the students and the counselors was too high. My counselor, he didn't care about me. You know, he looked at my grades, looked at the tests, the aptitude tests, and there it was. I was going to take shop classes and all these other classes, and that was it. He didn't care about my family environment, that I lived with an 80-year-old grandmother, that I came from a broken family. He didn't care about my home situation. He didn't care if I had potential or not. And it was not a counselor at Lincoln that got me into college. It was Josefina Sanchez. You know who that was. Josie and Pat. They were activists in Boyle Heights. They got me into the high potential program at UCLA. It wasn't a counselor, and I've heard a lot of stories where the counselors do not counsel you into college prep, honors classes, or AP classes, and the teachers don't have a clue either. They're teaching, and so you have all these kids that are undiscovered, their talent, and the ones that are already, the teachers that are already teaching AP and honors and college prep classes, well, they recruit their own, but the vast majority are still not getting into counseling. The average counseling student to ratio in California is 950 to 1. In LA Unified, the contract for the union says 500 to 1. And most of the schools that walked out, it's about 292. That's not counseling. That is just putting people in the classes. Now, David mentioned East LA. Yeah, East LA has 24,000 students. You know how many graduate with an AA from East LA? 1,000 a year. Something's happening there. They don't have the skills. And the graduation rates right now at LA Unified at Garfield is 91%. Roosevelt's about 78. You know, they're hitting about the 80%. That's high. You know why they're hitting that high? Well, the students are doing better. The teachers, more Latino Mexicano teachers, 34%. 38% are administrators. But one of the two of the big reasons, LA Unified lowered the credits to graduate from 230 to 210. And they also now accept algebra if you get a D to graduate, and they have all these online classes and these classes where they make up the classes that they fail. When I taught at Roosevelt for 20 years, I had students that were super seniors. They only had 25 units, and nobody cared about them. Now, if you fail a class, they make sure that you take these credit recovery classes. But the credits and stuff, they were lowered. That's why there was an increase. But also the funding now, California's 46 in funding per pupil. We have the violence now the shootings now that we didn't have before. When Mangas came into Lincoln High School in '68 and Carlos Montes, and they came out, they just walked into the campus. It was open. And they told everybody to walk out. I happened to be outside because I was coming in late every day to my first period, and nobody cared. And I saw these guys come in. And now the campuses are not the way they used to be. You can come in there with an AR-15 and blow everybody away, and it's very easy to do. I can go to Roosevelt High School and go to the front office and sign a little thing. They put a little tag on me, and I can have a briefcase with an AR-15 and blow everybody away. That's how easy it is to kill the students, you know. So it's a lot different now. They have dogs, you know, sniffing, and they have metal detectors. But in a lot of ways, we need that. But what we also need is character education, because the students are being socialized in a violent culture by the movies, by the gangster rap, by the misogynist content, by all that type of stuff, by the drug dealing, by the glorification of violence in our culture. Our culture, the morals and the ethics, in my opinion, there's a panic right now. There's an absence of that. And with number 45 in office, it's getting worse.
Going through a crisis. People don't want a diversity society, large portion of them. That's why Trump got in. They'd like to go back to when, like Trump said, make America great again. What he didn't say is that make America white again. And that's not going to ever come back. So this is going to be a short period of time. Hopefully we get through the next 3 years pretty fast, because this country is already set, not just for diversity in this country, but making ourselves a part of the world population. The trade, the money, it's just too much. And we want to sell refrigerators to Eskimos, right? We want to sell all kinds of other stuff that we can make or get for some other country. It's part of trade, it's part of money. And that's what's dominating. So temporarily, we're going to go through this fighting diversity, and eventually we're going to go in that direction because too many people in this country benefit from diversity and support it. And sometimes for altruistic purposes, but mostly for pragmatic. It means it makes America be great in business as America has become great through business.
Okay, questions? Does anybody have a question out there they'd like to ask? Yes.
More, it's not necessarily a question, it's more of a question of identity. The reason that you're sitting here,
Okay. He's talking about the question identity. I think it's really important because they're trying to change our identity. They took the word Chicano off the census,
Well-
the U.S. Census. The word Chicano was taken off, and they don't want to acknowledge that we exist, even though we have 40 million people in this country.
well, you were able, as being Chicanos, we didn't have, Mexican American or Latino and all of that baloney. Anyhow, that brought about the question of the Chicano moratorium, the largest anti-war mobilization in all of California, in Southern California, I mean. But the thing is, it's like, because it became such a tool for us, and our people started thinking in that way instead of saying Hispanic or hitting Italian or all that stuff like that. They started going for themselves. And I saw that situation. I work with Mr. Vigil over there at UCLA. And I saw this one guy that came up. He would go up and down Campbell Hall talking about what the people had to do, you people, the blacks, the browns, the Native Americans and all that. And they wanted to get rid of it. They saw it as the CIA and everybody who controls this country, they saw it as a tool to control us even better. So they had to do it. Okay, so that's why if you go across this country, any university in the United States has a Chicano studies program. But what is that about? That's a thing to keep us under control. Find out what these people are thinking and let's use it ourselves, One of the things that's, to me, it's a big irony that these people in this country think they're so hot. I mean, go down to the Mayan countries. Who created the zero? Was it white people? No, it was the Mayans are the ones who created the zero. And without having the zero, there would not be any computers. You look at if you go inside your computer, you'll see 0101 on, off. And that came about because of the indigenous mentality out in the jungle in the Mayan sectors. And, a lot of people don't even give us credit for that, but they're like, hey, you Indians are stupid, but hey, how would they have ever done anything without the zero? The zero is the key to opening all the questions of electronics and all that like that, and that's what made this country powerful because they have the.
Okay, let's go on to another question. Anybody else have any more questions out there? Way in the back.
Okay, I have a strong voice. Thank you for the invitation to be here. I want to I'll make two comments. One of the gentlemen about identity. I think it's our job as the elders now of our culture that have history, the idea of telling our young people who they are, their story, and having them identify themselves through our stories, to explain to them to have that. The other two, Dr. Fernandez, all the things you said about school safety are very
Okay, I know right now with the new law called 5150, they can actually pick you up. Just because somebody says you're crazy, they have the right to pick you up and put you in a mental institution. And so that's one of the laws that we're fighting against. The insanity that's going on is a result of the white culture. What is the white culture? Guns. Okay. And so I say no. I say no guns, better guitars, right? Guitars are better than guns. But the American culture is a gun culture because they've gunned down half the world, over the last 100 years, and we need to bring in our culture. And the other thing is that the Anglo-Saxon in America does not recognize the Mexican-American culture. They do not recognize the Chicano culture. They do not recognize the native Indian culture. And so because they're cultureless, they're ruthless. They're a ruthless society. A ruthless society, of course, who voted for Trump. And so that's why it's very important. Also, Chicano identity is also very important. Many people go crazy as a result of not having an identity. Identity gives strength to the mind. Identity gives you a foundation. Okay, another question.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on your comment. I think it's very important and it's something that I didn't mention. One of the crises now, one of the new problems, maybe old too. We need more bilingual school psychologists. I emailed one of the school board members, and I told him I want the numbers. I want to find out how many bilingual school psychologists. I remember when I taught special ed for 7 years, that we only had one bilingual psychologist who was part-time. There's also a shortage of nurses also. So, psychiatric social workers. So those mental health issues, there is a crisis, not only with the counselors, but also bilingual psychologists. It's funny, all these terms and all this diversity, there's a lot of confusion going on there. And then the books are still excluding us. When I taught at Roosevelt, we had a history book of 1,000 pages, and there was only 10 pages in the book about Mexican-American content. 10 pages, and Dr. Juan Gomez Quinones, Luisa Arroyo, Deborah Weber, even the union, we said, take this book out. How can you be using this book? And they're still using that book. And I went to the board, and I spoke, told Monica Garcia, hey, don't use this book anymore. But the publishers, like McGraw-Hill and these other guys, they make all this money, they give all these freebies to the teachers, and the teachers don't know, they haven't even gone through the book, and they get these books that are still excluding us. And we also need California history. California history is only taught in the 4th grade. How can you got 300 years of Spanish, you got first the indigenous, 300 years of Spanish rule, 27 years of Mexican rule, you have U.S. rule and nothing on California. The kids don't even know California history because it's been left out. 300 years have been left out, over 300 years.
Okay, we're going to finish up. Let's do our last 2 minutes because we can only do so much time. This is going to YouTube, and we only got so much time. So you want to go ahead with your last 2 minutes?
One of the other things that happened to me in my education here in the United States, Los Angeles primarily, the books not only didn't talk about it, but when they talked about anything in reference to my population, my race, my culture, it was always very negative, always very destructive, especially when you read that the United States moved westward and ran into a few Mexicans and cactuses, and that was it. That's degrading. I mean, we're equated with a plant, a cactus, and that was supposed to be, make us feel good. There's a book I highly recommend to everybody. Charles, I forget his name. Charles Mann. It's called 1491. Now, that's the year before Columbus discovered us, right? Millions of people that were already here. We had already discovered ourselves. But here, the Europeans defined their world on the basis of discovering millions of people. And Charles Mann writes about what this Western Hemisphere looked like. It was not a desolate savages going around killing each other. Fantastic civilizations, some irrigation systems, and other kinds of empires, and tall buildings. Teotihuacan, Tenochtitlan, Chichen Itza, Monte Alban, Maya ruins, all the others, Aztecs, and the Huicholes, and so on. That is something, this book is very good. 1491, Charles Mann.
Yeah. there are many commemorations going on, and there's going to be some more going on. And it's okay, it's great to commemorate the walkouts, because the walkout is a very, very powerful weapon that is still being used today. 41,000 students walked out against H.R. 4437, the Sensenbrenner bill, in 2006. 41,000 walked out. They weren't as organized as the East LA walkouts, but they went out. 187, I marched with my students. We walked out. There were, you know, the walkout has been a very potent weapon, and they're going to continue to use it just like in Parkland in Florida against the mass shootings. But remember, it's great to commemorate, but there's students, there's people that are doing commemorations. I'm not going to mention names, but there's people, you get the feeling after you hear some of these folks that everything is so great now, you know. We've reached educational equity. That is not true, and I hope that you get that from what I've told you, that la lucha sigue, and we have to continue.
Okay, I would like to close now. I would just like to say that it's very important that we continue the struggle. I know some of us have been a little relaxed in regards to Chicano issues, in regards to Mexican-American issues, but now is the time to move. I believe as a result of the LA Times and a lot of newspapers throughout the country, I believe the sleeping giant has awoken, and we must keep the giant awake. But it's up to you. It's up to everybody here to do some work to make sure that giant stays awake. And also, I'd like to thank Dr. James Vihid, Professor of Chicano Studies, Dr. John Fernandez, Professor of Chicano Studies, and I taught Chicano Studies for 13 years in the community colleges. I'd like to thank everybody for being here, and Viva la Raza.